The silverware froze mid-air as my sister's words cut through the Sunday dinner table. "You'll never be successful," Courtney laughed, her voice dripping with the same condescension I'd endured since childhood. "Some people just aren't built for achievement." I said nothing, just nodded and passed the mashed potatoes. Let her think what she wanted. Let them all think what they wanted about poor Melissa, who couldn't get her life together. They had no idea I'd been quietly building an empire while they were busy judging my choices. 2 weeks later, I stood on the familiar porch of our family home, keys in hand, not as a visitor, but as the owner. The same house where I'd been belittled for years, the same walls that witnessed my humiliation now belonged to me. The expression on Courtney's face when she received the notice that I'd bought our childhood home from right under their noses, worth every penny of the 7-figure sum I paid. What my family never knew, what they were about to discover, was that while they were dismissing my little online business as a hobby, I'd built a company valued at 8 figures, and I was just getting started. Nobody believes the underdog until the underdog becomes impossible to ignore. Growing up in Westfield, Connecticut, meant appearances were everything. Our family, the Sawyers, were fixtures in local society, with a legacy that my father never let us forget. Dad was chief surgeon at Westfield Memorial, Mom chaired 3 charity boards, and our sprawling colonial home on Maple Street hosted the kind of garden parties that made it into the local paper's society pages. In the Sawyer family hierarchy, achievement wasn't celebrated, it was expected. My sister Courtney followed the blueprint perfectly. Valedictorian, Yale, medical school, surgical residency at Mass General. My brother Thomas, Princeton, law review, partner at a prestigious Boston firm by 35. Both married well, both produced photogenic children who attended the right preschools. Their Christmas card photos could have been advertisements for American success. And then there was me. Melissa, the creative one, the disappointment. I still remember my Sweet 16 when Dad handed Courtney the keys to a brand new BMW. For our future doctor, he'd beamed. When my 16th birthday rolled around 9 months later, I got a used Volkswagen and a lecture about managing expectations. The message was clear. Some Sawyers were worth investing in, others weren't. The annual 4th of July barbecue when I was 19 crystallized everything. I just dropped out of Brown after 3 miserable semesters studying economics, a major I hated but chose to please my parents. I was helping Mom set up the patio when Aunt Carol cornered me. "So, Melissa," she said, gin and tonic in hand, loud enough for the entire backyard to hear. "What's your plan now that you've quit college? Will you be getting a real job or just figuring things out?" She used air quotes, looking around to make sure everyone caught her clever jab. Before I could answer, Dad jumped in. "Melissa's taking time to reassess," he said, the disappointment evident in his tight smile. "Not everyone can handle the pressures of an Ivy League education." I stood there, red-faced, as relatives nodded sympathetically, not at the humiliation I was experiencing, but at my poor parents who had somehow produced such an underperformer. What none of them knew, what I didn't even fully grasp then, was that I'd been building something during those wasted semesters at Brown, a website connecting college students with side gigs. It started in my dorm room as a way to help classmates find flexible work. By the time I dropped out, it had spread to 3 campuses. But that wasn't the kind of success that impressed the Sawyers. It wasn't prestigious, it wasn't traditional. So I stopped sharing my business ideas at family gatherings. I smiled through their patronizing questions about when I'd get serious or find a real career. I learned to exist on the periphery of family photos, the odd one out in a family of achievers. The final straw came when Grandma Elaine passed away last year. She was the only one who believed in me, who slipped me encouraging notes and the occasional check for your business thing, as she called it. Her death hit me harder than anyone knew, but what came after was worse. At the reading of her will, she left her antique jewelry collection, pieces meant to be passed down through generations of Sawyer women, to Courtney, to continue the proud Sawyer legacy, the will stated. I received a modest cash inheritance and her collection of vintage cookbooks. The room fell silent as the lawyer read this, everyone aware of the clear message. One sister was worthy of carrying on tradition, the other was not. What my family didn't know was that by then, my hobby business had evolved into a specialized platform connecting skilled trades workers with high-end clients across New England. We had over 50,000 users and had just secured our first round of significant funding. I was worth more on paper than my surgeon sister and lawyer brother combined. But I kept the secret close. Something inside me wanted more than mere validation. I wanted a grand gesture that would make it impossible for them to ever look down on me again. And the opportunity came sooner than I expected. Last month marked Dad's 60th birthday, and Mom had been planning the celebration for nearly a year. A catered affair at the Westfield Country Club, where Dad had been a member since before I was born. The who's who of Connecticut medical circles would be there, along with relatives from as far as Seattle and Miami. The invitation arrived in my mailbox with a handwritten note from Mom. Please dress appropriately, Melissa. The Andersons' daughter will be taking photos for the medical journal. Translation, don't embarrass us. I almost didn't go. My company was in the final stages of acquisition talks, a deal that would value us at $75 million. I had meetings scheduled, due diligence to complete, lawyers to consult, but some part of me still craved that elusive family approval, so I rescheduled everything and bought a plane ticket back to Connecticut. The week before the party, I got a call from our family's longtime real estate attorney, Richard Whitman. Melissa, I wanted to give you a heads up before you hear it from someone else, he said, his voice unusually hesitant. Your parents have decided to sell the family home. The news hit me like a physical blow. That house, with its wraparound porch, the maple tree I'd climbed as a child, the window seat in the library where I'd sketched my first business plan, was the only physical connection I still had to any sense of belonging. Why? I managed to ask. They're downsizing. The market's hot right now, and they want to move to something more manageable. The listing goes public next month, but they're open to private offers. He paused. I thought you should know. I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. By that evening, I'd called my financial advisor and made arrangements. If the acquisition went through, and all signs pointed to yes, I would have more than enough to make an offer they couldn't refuse. The night of Dad's birthday party arrived, and I walked into the country club wearing a simple black dress that had cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. My hair was professionally styled, my makeup subtle but flawless. I looked successful. I was successful. But as soon as I entered, I felt like an imposter in my own family. Courtney spotted me first. Champagne flute in hand, draped in a designer dress I recognized from the current season's collection. Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence, she said, air-kissing my cheek. We had a bet going on whether you'd actually show up. Thomas owes me $50. I wouldn't miss Dad's birthday, I said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. How's your little website thing going? She asked, not bothering to lower her voice, even as several of Dad's colleagues glanced our way. It's going well, I said simply. Still matching college kids with lawn mowing jobs? She laughed, and a few nearby relatives chuckled along. Something like that. Thomas joined us, his wife Bethany in tow. "Hey there, Lissa," he said, using my childhood nickname in that patronizing way that made me feel 16 again. "Courtney was just telling us you're still doing that internet thing." "The internet thing?" Bethany repeated with a smirk. "So Silicon Valley of you." I took a long sip of champagne. "Actually, Did you hear Mom and Dad are selling the house?" Thomas cut in. "End of an era." "I heard," I said. "Courtney and I are thinking of going in together to buy it," he continued. "Keep it in the family, you know." "That's generous of you," I said, my stomach tightening. "I'm sure they'll appreciate that." "Well, someone has to preserve the family legacy," Courtney added. "It's not like you were going to step up." I excused myself before I said something I'd regret. Throughout dinner, I sat at the extended family table, not the immediate family one where my parents, siblings, and their spouses were seated. I watched as Dad received a golf membership from Thomas, a vacation package from Courtney, and countless other expensive gifts that screamed success and thoughtfulness. My gift, a rare first edition of his favorite medical text that had taken months to track down, sat unopened among the others. He'd get to it eventually, I told myself. After dinner, everyone gathered for speeches. Colleagues praised Dad's surgical innovations. Mom tearfully recounted their 40 years together. Thomas spoke about following in Dad's professional footsteps. And then Courtney took the microphone. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, her voice carrying across the banquet hall, "to the man who taught us all what it means to be successful." She went on to list Dad's accomplishments, then segued into her own, and finally Thomas's. The perfect Sawyer success story. "And I have some news," she continued, her smile widening. "As of this morning, Thomas and I have made an offer on the family home. Mom and Dad, we couldn't bear to see strangers living in the place where we grew up. It's our gift to you, and to future generations of successful Sawyers." Applause erupted. Mom wiped away tears. Dad stood to embrace both of them. And that's when my phone buzzed with an email. The acquisition had gone through. The deal was final. I was now worth more than everyone in this room combined. As if on cue, Mom spotted me and waved me over. "Melissa, come join the family photo." I walked over, phone still in hand, pulse racing. As I took my place at the edge of the group, Courtney leaned in and whispered, "Maybe if your internet thing ever takes off, you can buy a nice little condo nearby. Visit the house for holidays." I met her eyes, something shifting inside me. "That's a lovely idea, Courtney." "We're just about to talk details over Sunday dinner this weekend," she added. "You're welcome to come, but we'll understand if you're too busy with your business." The way she said business, like it was a child's lemonade stand, was the final straw. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied. Sunday dinner at the Sawyer household had followed the same ritual for decades. Mom's pot roast, Dad's carving, Thomas pouring the wine, Courtney dominating the conversation, me silent unless spoken to. But this Sunday was different. As I drove up the familiar driveway, I wasn't the same person who had left this house feeling small and insignificant countless times before. The papers were in my bag, the transaction complete. All that remained was the revelation. The first hour proceeded as expected. Talk of hospital politics, Courtney's daughter's piano recital, Thomas's new case. Mom refilling water glasses, Dad nodding approvingly at his successful children. "So," Courtney said, finally acknowledging my presence, "did you hear? Our offer on the house was accepted yesterday." She turned to our parents. "We're thinking of updating the kitchen, maybe converting Melissa's old room into a home gym." I took a sip of water. "Actually, I've been meaning to tell you something about the house." "Oh," Mom looked up, momentarily interested. "Yes, I've been talking to a realtor myself," I said casually, "about real estate investments." Dad chuckled. Bit out of your price range around here, isn't it, sweetheart? Not exactly, I replied. I reached for my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. In fact, I've already made a purchase. A condo downtown? Courtney guessed with a smirk. Those starter units are perfect for singles. I slid the paperwork across the table toward my parents. No, this house, actually. The silence that followed was absolute. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "What are you talking about?" Thomas demanded. "I made an all-cash offer 2 days ago, significantly above asking price, with no contingencies and a fast close. Mom and Dad accepted yesterday morning." I turned to my siblings. "About 3 hours before your offer arrived." Courtney's face flushed crimson. "That's not possible. You don't have that kind of money." "Actually, I do." I pulled out my phone and opened the business section of the Wall Street Journal. "My internet thing was acquired last week. It made the business pages." I handed the phone to Dad, whose expression had shifted from dismissal to shock as he read the headline. "$75 million?" he read aloud, his voice barely audible. "The final figure was closer to 83, I corrected, plus stock options in the parent company." Mom snatched the phone from Dad's hands. "This is your company? Skill Match?" I nodded. "The hobby I've been working on for the past 8 years while you all were deciding I wasn't worth taking seriously." "Why didn't you tell us?" Thomas asked, his lawyer brain clearly recalculating everything he thought he knew. "Would you have believed me?" I asked simply. "Or would it have been another opportunity to remind me how I'd never measure up to the Sawyer standard of success?" The uncomfortable silence answered my question. "But why the house?" Mom finally asked. "If you have this kind of money, you could buy any property you want." I looked around the table, at the faces of people who had defined my worth by their narrow metrics of success for my entire life. Because for as long as I can remember, this house has been the physical manifestation of everything I could never be good enough to deserve. The perfect Sawyer home for the perfect Sawyer family. And every time I walked through that door, I felt like an outsider. I took a deep breath. I bought it because I wanted to prove, to you and to myself, that I am enough, that my version of success counts, even if it doesn't come with a medical degree or a law partner title. Courtney, her face still flushed, found her voice. "So, what now? You're going to kick us all out? Make us come crawling to you to visit our childhood home?" I looked at her steadily. "No. I'm going to give Mom and Dad lifetime rights to stay here as long as they want. This is their home. I just wanted to be the one to secure it for them." Dad, who had barely spoken, finally looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. $83 million, he repeated, as if testing how the words felt. "Yes," I confirmed, "and that's just the beginning. The company is expanding into Europe next quarter." "I don't understand," Mom said, her voice small. "Why keep it a secret all these years? Why let us think you were failing?" I finished for her. "At first, because you made it clear my path wasn't worth discussing. Later, because I needed to prove it to myself before I could face your judgment. And honestly, because after a while, it was easier to be underestimated than to constantly defend my choices." I stood up, suddenly needing air. I never wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer. I wanted to build something of my own, and I did, without support, without encouragement, without anyone in this family believing it was possible. Thomas cleared his throat. "Melissa, I'm not finished," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "For years, I've listened to all of you talk about legacy and success as if there's only one definition. Well, I've created my own legacy, and it's every bit as valuable as yours." I picked up my purse.
The papers for the house are all there. Like I said, nothing changes for Mom and Dad. You're welcome to stay as long as you want." "Where are you going?" Mom asked, half rising from her chair. "Back to my life," I replied. "I have an early flight tomorrow. The company's opening new headquarters in Austin." As I walked toward the door, Dad's voice stopped me. "Melissa." His tone was different, uncertain, almost humbled. "Your grandmother would have been proud." I turned back, surprised to feel tears threatening. "No, Dad."
Grandma was already proud. She was the only one who ever was. With that, I walked out the front door of the house that now belonged to me, leaving my family in stunned silence at the dining table, where just 2 weeks earlier, they had laughed at the idea that I could ever be successful. The fallout from my Sunday dinner revelation was immediate and seismic. I had barely reached my hotel when my phone started buzzing with texts and calls, first from Thomas, then Mom, finally even Courtney. I silenced it all. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel compelled to explain myself to my family. By Monday morning, news of the acquisition had spread through Westfield's gossip network. Former classmates I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to reconnect. My parents' friends always knew I had potential. The narrative was already being rewritten, not as the family disappointment, but as the secret success story. I flew back to Austin as planned, immersing myself in transition meetings and expansion plans. 3 days passed before I finally returned a call to my mother. "The roses need pruning," she said after an awkward greeting. "The gardener usually comes on Thursdays." "Mom," I interrupted gently, "I meant what I said. Nothing changes for you and Dad. It's still your home." A long pause followed. "Why didn't you tell us, Melissa, all these years? Would it have mattered?" I asked. "Before the acquisition, before the validation from the outside world, would my success have counted?" Her silence was answer enough. "I tried, Mom. Remember when I got my first 1,000 users? I mentioned it at Christmas 4 years ago, and Dad changed the subject to Courtney's research publication. Or when I secured my first angel investor, Thomas asked if that meant I finally had a real job yet. We didn't understand," she said quietly. "You didn't try to," I corrected. Another week passed. My executive assistant forwarded an email from Richard Whitman, our family attorney. Courtney and Thomas wanted to discuss the house situation. I agreed to a video call, more out of curiosity than obligation. Thomas appeared on screen first, looking unusually subdued. Courtney joined moments later, her perfect composure noticeably frayed. "We've been talking," Thomas began, lawyer mode activated, "about your purchase of the house and what it means for the family." "It means Mom and Dad have security," I replied evenly. "That's all." "And after they're gone?" Courtney asked. "What happens to the family home then?" I studied my sister's face, the barely concealed anxiety, the fear of losing her place at the top of the family hierarchy. "I haven't decided," I answered truthfully, "but I can tell you this. I won't be making any decisions about the Sawyer family legacy without consulting the Sawyers." Courtney's relief was visible but short-lived. "So you're holding it over our heads? Some kind of revenge?" "No, Courtney. Unlike you, I don't measure my worth by how small I can make others feel." The words came out sharper than intended, decades of hurt crystallizing in a single sentence. Thomas, ever the mediator, jumped in. "What Courtney means is, we're trying to understand your intentions. This is a lot to process." "My intention was to secure something that matters to our family," I explained, "not to hurt anyone. But I won't apologize for finally standing up for myself." The conversation shifted, surprisingly, to my company. For the first time, they asked real questions. How had I built it? What challenges had I faced? Thomas admitted he'd read the full acquisition story and was impressed by the valuation metrics. corporate speak for "you did good." As the call wound down, Courtney cleared her throat. "Dad's been different since Sunday," she said, quieter. "He pulled out all your old business competition certificates from high school, the ones Mom stored in the attic." I remembered those certificates, regional entrepreneurship contests I'd won that had been treated as quirky anomalies rather than indicators of my path. "He said something about missed signs," Thomas added. "I think he's realizing he misjudged you. We all did." After we hung up, I sat alone in my Austin penthouse, surrounded by the trappings of conventional success that had finally made my family take notice. But the validation felt hollow somehow, tied to numbers and acquisitions rather than who I was. The real breakthrough came a month later, when Dad called, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I found your gift," he said. "The medical text, first edition Osler." "I'm glad," I replied, unsure where this was going. "It must have cost a small fortune," he continued. "You bought it before the acquisition?" "Yes, last year." A heavy silence followed. "You always paid attention to what mattered to me," he said finally, "even when I wasn't paying attention to what mattered to you." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from my father, and somehow it meant more than any direct acknowledgement could have. "I'd like to understand your business," he said suddenly, "really understand it, not just the dollar figures." That conversation became a weekly occurrence. Dad, who had barely acknowledged my career path for 8 years, now asked detailed questions about user acquisition strategies and scaling challenges. He even read industry articles to better grasp the context. Mom took a different approach. She visited Austin, her first trip to see where I'd built my life. She walked through my office, met my team, saw the environment I'd created where innovation was celebrated and traditional pedigrees meant nothing next to results and character. "You've built a family here," she observed as we watched my employees collaborate in the common area. "A different kind," I agreed. Courtney was the last to come around. Her shift began with a text after she'd read a profile of me in a business magazine. "They called you a visionary. I Googled your company. The reviews from your employees are impressive." Coming from Courtney, this was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Slowly, something shifted, not just in how my family saw me, but in how I saw myself in relation to them. The need for their approval, that desperate hunger that had driven me for so long, began to loosen its grip. 6 months after buying the family house, I made a decision. I flew back to Connecticut and invited everyone to dinner. Not at the house, but at a neutral restaurant where we'd all be on equal footing. "I've been thinking about the house," I began once we were all seated, "and I've made some decisions." They tensed collectively. Years of family dynamics instantly activated. "I'm establishing a trust," I explained. "The house will belong to all of us, equally. Mom and Dad have lifetime rights to live there, of course. After that, it will serve as a family property that any Sawyer can use, holidays, summers, whenever. No one person will control it." "Why?" Courtney asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "You bought it. You earned the right to decide." I smiled at the irony of Courtney arguing for my right to exclusive ownership after everything. "Because legacy isn't about control," I said. "It's about connection. And I don't want to be connected to this family through power dynamics or scorekeeping." Thomas raised his glass. "To redefining the Sawyer legacy," he offered. We all drank to that, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like a full member of the family rather than an asterisk. The most unexpected development came 3 months later. Dad called with an idea: converting part of the house into a startup incubator for young entrepreneurs from Westfield High School. We could offer mentorship, small seed grants, he suggested. Give kids like you were a head start. I wish I'd given you. It was the most meaningful acknowledgement he could have offered, not just accepting my path, but seeing value in it for others. The incubator launched last month. Our first cohort includes 12 teenagers with business ideas ranging from environmental tech to community services. Courtney helps with the medical innovations. Thomas offers legal guidance. Mom coordinates the community outreach. And me? I'm finally home, in a way I never was when I actually lived there. I still think about that Sunday dinner sometimes. My sister's dismissive laugh, the casual cruelty of, "You'll never be successful." Not because it hurts anymore, but because it marked the moment everything changed. Success didn't come when my company sold for millions. It didn't come when I bought the family house. Real success came when I finally understood that I didn't need anyone else's definition of achievement to validate my own. The house that once symbolized everything I couldn't have now stands for something entirely different. A place where young entrepreneurs are nurtured rather than dismissed, where different paths are celebrated, where the next generation of dreamers can find support I never had. My family and I aren't perfect. We still disagree, still occasionally fall into old patterns. But now we face each other as equals, different but equally valuable. That's a kind of wealth no acquisition could ever provide. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that success isn't measured by the price tags you can afford or the approval you can earn. It's built in the quiet moments when you choose to believe in yourself when no one else will. When you keep going despite the doubts, especially the ones planted by the people who should believe in you most, your path might not look like anyone else's. Trust it anyway. If my story resonated with you, I'd appreciate if you'd like this video and subscribe to hear more about entrepreneurship, family dynamics, and finding your own definition of success. Leave a comment below about a time someone underestimated you and how you proved them wrong.